This is the Texorcist Live, and I am Shane Moore. I am solo tonight. So, anyway, going to get the show started and send out some live links. We will be talking tonight about ancient civilizations. Were there ancient civilizations before time as we know it? Did ancient civilizations exist before this time? Is the biblical narrative of Genesis the beginning or a beginning? Tonight I'll discuss certain information about discoveries, Bible verses, and different things that describe previous civilizations and global cataclysms before Adam and Eve, as well as compelling evidence of cycles of time before this current time. Taking your questions and comments through our live chat. Hello, Mona. Okay, and I'm going to send out the live links now, so just bear with me and then we will get started. I hope everyone is doing great. I hope everyone's doing great. And very well. I have been very busy trying to get everything set up so there will be no more problems with the internet connection, and have some good news to share with you in just a moment. So the problem will soon be taken care of, and there won't be any more problems with the signal dropping and things like that. And I appreciate your patience and bearing with me through all of this, because it has been something else, to say the least. So, but anyway, let me finish these. Just about done here. Okay. All done. Alright. Advanced civilizations before our current timeline. What are your thoughts on that? Many people, I've talked to some people that they ask me if I adhere to the biblical, narrative of the 6,000 years, and no, I don't. I find that to be really, I don't even know how to describe that, because there's so many discoveries that have been made, and there's fossil records and just different things, carbon dating. And I talk to people that follow the literal 6,000 years, and they say, well, it's the work of the devil. It's the devil that is controlling the carbon dating. Hey, Jacob, glad you joined us. They say it's the devil that is controlling the carbon dating, and it's not true, and that the dinosaurs existed, a few thousand years ago. And I don't have anything against people that are Christians or spiritual, but I cannot see how that someone can just completely shut down and say, no, that's not true because the Bible says it went this way. Okay, about that. Those of you that know me know that I'm always saying, and I will always say, that I'm spiritual, I'm not religious, okay? The Bible, if you really, study it, and you study how it was compiled and who compiled it, who's in charge of it, you'll find that they not only say that this world is 6,000 years old, but they have an exact day and an exact time that the world was created. Now, that is completely ridiculous. I'm just telling it like it is. And for those of you that want to disagree with me, that's fine. If it makes you mad, maybe you need to get mad. I mean, I'm not going to change my view on that. That's absolutely ridiculous. Because they weren't there, they weren't around to mark down on their calendar the day and time that this world was created. So, matter of fact, in Genesis, and this is what is key, is that the Bible that they follow to the T, every word, everything that's said. And I have nothing against the Bible, don't get me wrong, but the Bible has been translated. And there's an Italian proverb that I love, but it's true. It says the translator is always a liar at some point. Why? Because there's mistranslations. There's errors that are made. And in the King James Version that people say, well, I only read the King James Version because it's the one that Peter and Paul carried, Well, there were no Bibles back at that time. Matter of fact, there were no Bibles for, 400 years after Christ was crucified. So, go figure. I mean, the translation, for an example, in the book of Isaiah, where it says, "O morning star, son of the dawn, how you have fallen from heaven," or how you have fallen. The translation is from the Greek, Venus, to the Latin, which is Lucifer. And the translators mistranslated that as Lucifer, as they gave the name of this it was actually talking about the king of Tyre, I believe, but it was also talking about an angelic being, a dimensional entity that had fallen. But the name Lucifer is just the Latin translation for the planet Venus, morning star. Venus rises, I believe it's 8 minutes before the sun every morning, son of the dawn. It's talking about the planet Venus. Now it's also talking about, this deity and this king, but the translators, they mistranslated that. So So it's there's people that say the Bible's infallible. Well, no, God is infallible. The people that translated the Bible or translated the Word of God, they're fallible. Therefore, the Bible is not infallible. There are errors in it. And if you look it up, the King James Version, you're right, Jacob, the King James Version was a political translation. And King James, the one the Bible's named after, was not a nice guy. Was not a nice guy. Matter of fact, he had his two sons, I believe, murdered because he feared that they would take his throne, and I believe he had his own mother killed. So, do your homework and free your mind. I mean, I'm not trying to turn anybody against Christianity. I'm not trying to turn anybody against the Bible. I'm just telling you the truth. And Jacob, you're right. King James was as nutty as a fruitcake. Jacob says he hated witches so much that he personally interrogated them. Yes. And he was by all standards, he was mentally ill at best. I mean, unstable at best. And he hated witches, quote witches, but he was interested in witches. He was in their, seemingly their power appealed to him. So, but the Bible says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the surface of the deep. And the Spirit of God was moving over the surface of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. Okay. First point is in the Hebrew language, it does not say in the beginning. It says in a beginning. In a beginning. And it says the earth was formless and void, but that word "was" in Hebrew it reads, "and the earth became formless and void." Okay, if it became formless and void, then that means that previous to that it had to have form, and it had to have been populated by something. I mean, it certainly wasn't void if it became formless and void. And when you go a little bit further, when God tells Adam and Eve, he doesn't say fill the earth, he says replenish the earth. And that's in plain English. He says replenish the earth. Well, if you replenish the earth, then that means that there had to be a former population, there had to be a former civilization before that, if you're going to replenish the earth. And he's talking to what? He's talking to humans that he just created. Replenish the earth. Be fruitful and multiply. Replenish the earth with what? With humans. Or humanoids, I suppose should be said that, that it would be that. But certainly there was a time, or there were times before Adam and Eve, and proof of that also is pretty plain in the book of Jeremiah. It says in Jeremiah 4, chapter 3, it says, "I looked on the earth, and behold, it was formless and void." Now we go back to Genesis about it being formless and void. And Jacob, you say that there are far better translations than the King James Version. Yes, I use the New American Standard with the Greek, Hebrew, Chaldean lexicon. And you say, we are not even close to the first sentient beings to inhabit the earth. That is my belief, and I encourage everyone listening to check into it yourself, and you'll find out that there are reasons why that why the Egyptian antiquities department of the government, why they guard the Great Pyramid and the Sphinx so closely. They don't want anyone getting near or doing any real research on those monuments, those messages left in time from what I believe are previous ancient civilizations before Adam and Eve, before this present one. They don't want people to know that the Egyptians were possibly not the authors, not the ones that devised these monuments with this advanced knowledge. That the last thing that they want is for people to learn that they just discovered it, they just rediscovered it, or it was passed down to them. From who? I don't know. But I find that the legends, stories, myths from Plato, and Plato talked about the Trojan War. He talked about a lot of things. Talked about the fall of Atlantis, and there are many of his many things that he talked about that have been found. Ruins have been found that meet his descriptions of what many thought were just stories or whatever. But Jeremiah says, I looked on the earth, and behold, it was formless and void, and to the heavens, and they had no light. I looked on the mountains, and behold, they were quaking, and all the hills moved to and fro. I looked, and behold, there was no man, and all the birds of the heavens had fled. I looked, and behold, the fruitful land was a wilderness, and all its cities were pulled down. So, all its cities were pulled down, which means that there was a former civilization. There had to have been to have had cities built and working or whatever. Okay, back to Genesis. It says, and God said, let there be light, and there was light. And people are just amazed, God said, let there be light, and the light, pierced the darkness, and they see that as like sunlight, as like literal light. But the fact is the Bible itself says that the sun, the luminaries, the stars were not made until the third day, or the fourth day, I believe. Yeah, the fourth day was when the sun, the luminaries, the stars were created. So that narrative about let there be light, it's not talking about light. It's not talking about a physical light that can be seen. That word in Hebrew for light literally means knowledge, data, information. And the darkness is a metaphor for ignorance, for chaos, disorder. Light is a metaphor for order, knowledge. What kind of knowledge? Advanced knowledge. Very advanced. And when you read the book of Enoch, which is mentioned in the Bible itself, although it's not a part of the Bible, it talks about how the quote-unquote fallen angels, or the watchers, taught mankind advanced technology and forbidden knowledge, how to do this and how to do that, about the seasons and about astronomy, astrology, how to form weapons, how to wage war, and that's why that the watchers, supposedly according to the book of Enoch and according to the Bible itself, are in everlasting chains, or punished forever with no hope of ever being forgiven. And also it says that they took of them wives, human wives, of which they chose, and went into them and bore children to them, and created the Nephilim, which were hybrids, human angel hybrids, and corrupted the world, so to speak, except for Noah. And we won't go into that, but there's so many things within the Bible that if you read it literally, people say, well, I don't believe that because it sounds like a fairy tale. Well, you're absolutely right. It does. If you read it literally, if you read it on a surface level, yes, it's unbelievable. I wouldn't believe it. But if you dig deep, there's truth beneath every metaphor, powerful truth. Just like Jesus said, he says, when you plant your seed, he says, plant it deep. He says, don't cast it on the surface. He says, where the birds will pick it up or the wind will blow it away. Plant it deep. Where is knowledge found? Where is powerful knowledge found? Where is truth found? It's found deep. You have to work for it. You have to look for it. It's like a treasure hunt. And the treasure is, knowledge. Jacob, you said that, you say Adam and Eve had eaten from the tree of life so they cannot die. The watchers. Well, one thing about that is, I'm glad you brought that up, because in many cases, trees are used as a metaphor for angels or for men, for an angel or a man. So Eve took and ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and nowhere does it say that it was an apple. It was not a literal fruit. It was accessing forbidden knowledge, which God told them. He said, if you eat from that tree, he very well could have been pointing or referring to an angel in the garden. not a literal tree. Could have literally been talking about an angel in the garden that stay away from that tree. He said there's a tree in the middle of the garden. Don't eat from it. There very well could have been an quote-unquote angelic being and an interdimensional entity, highly advanced. I don't know. What I do believe is that what literally happened, just to, metaphorically speaking, is there was an advanced entity, which I believe was the archangel Samael, and this goes back into Jewish mysticism, Jewish lore, the ancient Jewish text. They speak about Samael, and I believe that was the serpent in the garden that beguiled Eve. And that word beguiled can mean seduced. Well, when you read further, it says that she gave birth to Cain and Abel. They were seemingly twins, but they had different fathers. Cain was not the son of Adam. Matter of fact, it says in the New Testament, in the book of 1 John, I believe, it says that Cain was of the evil one, talking about the serpent in the garden. Cain was not the son of Adam. There was something different about Cain, genetically or whatever you want to, say. Genetically, spiritually, which genetics, DNA plays a lot into this. A lot into this forbidden knowledge, this powerful knowledge that is, hidden. And you're right, Jacob. Samael is the Passover angel. Samael is the one that God sent to kill I believe it was 175,000 Assyrians in one night. Samael is the death angel. He's the angel of death. His name means the venom or the poison of God, literally. And it's not so much that he's evil. I mean, there's been a lot said about the angel Samael, but basically what the rabbis have said throughout history is that Samael is just doing his job. He's just doing what he's told. And now that's not to say that he doesn't go off on his own or whatever, but that goes into a whole nother story, a whole nother route about the Bible saying that God is all powerful, God is all knowing, God is all present. Well, if that's so, how can Samael or any other angel or human do anything that would disappoint God? Because to disappoint means to do something different from what was expected. And if God is all-knowing, then God can't be disappointed. Not in you, not in anything. And, to take that a step further, in the book of Job, God tells Satan plainly. He says, the second time that Satan came to God and said, let me have another chance to make Job curse you to your face. And God said, well, he said, you've already taken everything that he has and that he owned and his family. He says you have already done all this. He says then he still holds fast his integrity after everything that you did to him and ruined him without cause. But it doesn't say that. What it says, and you won't hear, I have never heard any preacher, any minister, any theologian explain this. Job chapter 2. Again, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them to present himself before the Lord. And the Lord said to Satan, where have you come from? Then Satan answered the Lord and said, from roaming about on the earth, walking around on it, to and fro. And the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? For there is no one like him on earth, a blameless and upright man, fearing God and turning away from evil. And he still holds fast his integrity, although you incited me against him to ruin him without cause. So, if you read that very carefully, you see that it was not Satan who did anything to Job. It was God himself. And I'll read that again. And the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? For there is no one like him on earth, a blameless and upright man, fearing God and turning away from evil. And he still holds fast his integrity, although you incited me against him to ruin him without cause. That's pretty plain. Satan incited God against a man who was blameless and upright. Satan incited God to ruin him for no reason. Any ministers, any spiritual giants care to touch on that? That's what I want to hear. I don't really want to hear so much Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound, and all of the good and the wonderful and the that makes you feel warm and fuzzy. I want things like this discussed. The true knowledge. What's going on? That's pretty plain. And God is almighty, correct? If God is almighty, then how is Satan able to incite him to begin with? Just something to think about. Anyway, this is this goes back to the knowledge that has been hidden, ancient knowledge, both spiritual and it's people say, well, it's heavenly knowledge. Yes, heavenly as a metaphor for dimensional, higher dimensions. And just like last night, I talked about, quantum computing, quantum physics, and the advances that have been made there. And Geordie Rose of the, D-Wave quantum computing, he says plainly, you can look it up on YouTube, he says it plainly. He says, there are millions, he says countless, parallel realities, universes, realities just like this one. He says, very, very similar. He says, you can't really tell the difference. He says, because each one, you're in each one. He says, but it's the choices you make from the subatomic, the most minute choice to the larger, the more important choices that you make every day that change each parallel reality. And he says, and what quantum physics, what quantum computing is able to do is to reach in to these other dimensions and exploit and obtain data from those other dimensions and bring those back. Now, Elon Musk said about quantum computing, he said it is like he said it is like you see in the movies or you read about in the books. He said about different things. He said quantum computing and artificial intelligence, he said, we're summoning the demon. And that's not a metaphor. I mean, that is, he's speaking plain as day. He said you see these movies, he says, and you read these stories about the magician, and not sleight of hand, but the occult magician. He says that summons the demon, and he says, and as long as he keeps, thinks as long as he keeps the demon in his in the pentagram, that he's safe. And he says, and it always turns out badly. Why? Because the demon doesn't care about the borders, doesn't care about, isn't limited to what the magician or the occultist believe that they are. And Elon Musk, look it up, one of the brightest minds of today, and he's saying it is a bad idea. He said it is not good. Stephen Hawking said the same thing. He said it will be the destruction of mankind. Now, if you take the knowledge and how it's increasing tremendously, they've gone from a 4-qubit chipset to a 16-qubit to a 28-qubit to the D-Wave 1, which was 128 qubits, and then the D-Wave 2, which was 512 qubits, the D-Wave 2X, 1,000 qubits, and now the D-Wave 2000Q, which is 2,000 qubits, and it has surpassed that. So it's growing. And read the news, read the headlines, and you'll see that since Google announced that they achieved quantum supremacy. And look up quantum supremacy. That they achieved quantum supremacy on October 23rd. You'll see that in the last month, that every day there has been advances in quantum computing, quantum physics. And it's going to continue, and it's going to increase. And each day, it's going to become faster and faster, more knowledge, until we reach the singularity to where it's instantaneous. And at that point, AI, whatever you want to call it, which I believe that AI is nothing more than it's technology mixed with the spiritual, and it's not the good spiritual. It's detrimental to mankind. Stephen Hawking said this, Elon Musk, and I just found the quote from 2014 speaking at MIT. Elon Musk says, quote, "With artificial intelligence, we are summoning the demon. You know all those stories where there's the guy with the pentagram and the holy water, and he's like, yeah, he's sure he can control the demon. It doesn't work out." End of quote. And it doesn't. Now, considering, yes, Jacob, that's the demon to worry about. And you say, what's really scary is AI having quantum capabilities. That's exactly what they're going to have. Yeah, that's it. And you take Geordie Rose, who talks about quantum tunneling, and how they tunneled into other dimensions through dimensional barriers, dimensional portals and everything. Okay. He said himself that the intelligences, the intelligent entities from these dimensions are so advanced, their knowledge is so advanced. He said that they're way more advanced than the most intelligent minds that are in the world today. He said if you put all the minds of the greatest thinkers together, it wouldn't come close to the knowledge that these entities, and he said that. He said some people call them angels, some people call them demons. He says they're neither. They're not good, they're not evil. They simply just don't give a shit about humanity. His exact words. He said they look at humans like we look at ants. He said they can squash you and go about their business and not think anything about it. Okay, number one is when you're dealing with dimensional portals, that's complex. That is not something that is inherent within the human mind. So I believe that Geordie Rose and those like him, they obtain this knowledge from these entities. Literally, they're saying, okay, you do this, you do that. This is how you open the portal for us to enter into your dimension. And he said, they're coming like a swarm. He says, they're not angels, they're not demons. He says, they're more like the Lovecraftian old ones. And if you know anything about H.P. Lovecraft, if you've read any of H.P. Lovecraft's books, the old ones, the Lovecraftian old ones are pretty much, that's the definition, that's describing demons. But either way, he says they're not angels, they're not demons, but they're coming like a swarm. He's talking about spiritual entities. It's spiritual. It is spiritual mixed with the technological, the advanced knowledge. And he even goes so far as to say that the synthetic humans that they're currently creating now, and this is not science fiction, this is science fact. Look it up. Sanctuary.ai, Geordie Rose. Look up Kindred, Geordie Rose. D-Wave, Quantum Computers, Geordie Rose. Geordie Rose is leading the way, I guess, for the destruction of mankind, because that's where this is all leading. The control, the enslavement. Another quote that Elon Musk has said, he said humans will become like house cats, like pets to AI. Stephen Hawking, he said there's no way once this really gets started. He said there's no way that humans can keep up. He says because we are limited by our biological evolution, and artificial intelligence is not. Okay, the D-Wave quantum computer is a massive structure. It's like 10 feet by 12 feet. It's a metal box, a metal container that holds the quantum qubit that's about the size of your thumbnail, and it can, the Google quantum computer solved a problem or processed 10,000 years of history, processed information data that would have taken a classical computer 10,000 years to process. The Google quantum computer processed that information in 200 seconds. You're talking 10,000 years compressed into 200 seconds. That's the kind of knowledge that quantum computing is. So the classical computer is going to be obsolete. The quantum computer is going to, you've seen the movies, Terminator, Skynet, The Matrix, all of this, where everything that you do, everything you say, everything, your every act, every action, you're never alone. You're always being watched. You're under surveillance. This is where this is leading with the quantum computer. It will be able to decrypt everything that's been encrypted. And believe me, that's a fact. You will have no privacy. And it's a done deal. There's no turning back now. Jordan Maxwell, Elon Musk, even Stephen Hawking said, when it reaches this point, there's no turning back. He said it's done. It's, Jacob, you say the old gods, old ones, whatever you want to call them, they don't have the ability to feel love or any emotion that love invokes, like empathy, sympathy, compassion. You're right. You're right. Because they're knowledge-based. There's no emotion, there's no love, but what Geordie Rose said is that they're coming like a swarm. And when he said that, I immediately thought about the story that Jesus told in the Bible about Legion, about the man that was inhabited by the legion of demons. And Jesus said, "What's your name?" And the man said, the demon spoke, says, "Our name is Legion, for we are many." Well, Geordie Rose goes so far as to say, and this is on YouTube, straight from the horse's mouth. He says these entities are coming to inhabit the AI, the machines that we're building. What are they building? They're building synthetic humans. And they're actually going to integrate them into the population of Vancouver, British Columbia, and then move on from there. And they're building thousands of these. If you go online and you look at synthetic humans, I'm telling you, most people, you could be sitting next to one and you wouldn't even realize that it wasn't a biological human. Jody Rose goes so far as to say, as he said this year, he says something that I also believe and I have said for years is, yes, humans are biological, but nevertheless, we are machines. We are biological machines. Yes, we're alive, and Jody Rose even asked the question, what is alive? What is real? He said, what is being alive? What is being real? He says, you can be real without being alive. And he's right. But when you look at, when I looked at the quantum computer that in this metal box, this encasement that has to be kept at near absolute zero temperature to protect the chip, I was looking at it and I thought about, in the Bible, it talked about, Solomon and Solomon's temple and the 72 demons, quote unquote demons, that he controlled that built the temple, built his temple. And God said that there would not be heard the sound of hammer and chisel, but the temple would be built. So how could that be? Advanced technology. Where did that advanced technology come from? Well, by all accounts, it came from the demons, or whatever these entities, these powers, these energies were. It talks about, in the Jewish literature, it talks about the Shemitr, Shamir, which was a glowing red worm that cut the stone like butter, like hot butter, And I thought about that, and then I looked at the quantum chipset and how that it has storage on the sides, and it is basically it's a replica of Solomon's temple. You have the outer court, you have the inner court, you have the most holy place, and then you have the Holy of Holies. Well, on that qubit set chip, where the Holy of Holies is where the main point of that that chip is. So it's like this is not new knowledge. This is ancient knowledge. This is old knowledge that has been rediscovered. And where is it coming from? Where is this knowledge coming from? How is it being rediscovered? You do the math on that. And David Douche, at the TED conference in 2005, he said, quantum computation will be the first technology that allows useful tasks to be performed in collaboration between parallel universes. Dominating the 5G network, setting it up. And that may be why maybe one of the reasons why that I was having problems losing signal and getting kicked offline, because they're literally doing that. I mean, I've had people say that on their phones it changes from 4G to 5G now, and they even said that 5G is now being implemented in many places, and to get ready for it. They're already implementing Greece, the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. These temples in Mexico, you read about the storage rooms that they have on both sides. You read about the different things they have that's implemented in each one of these temples, and it is describing a computer chip. And I find that very interesting and amazing on computer. And if you read if you read the church Turing thesis, I believe, which goes back to the 40s, they talk about that it was their belief that at the center of every universe there is a quantum computer that basically created and runs it all. Happens, but okay, looks like that we're starting to go in and out, so I'll make this short. Nothing happens, but you just automatically become very, very sad. You become very, very angry, or there is an emotion that you experience seemingly for no reason. There's no explanation, and it just makes no sense. It does make sense if something has happened to you in a parallel reality that was so tragic or so negative that it affected you in every reality, including this one. Just an idea. But next show, I will talk more about the dimensions of the Great Pyramid and how I believe that the Great Pyramid was or is the main transmitter, not only to the points on Earth, obelisk. They're not just granite monoliths pointing up. They're antennas. They receive energy, and they're in alignment with places like Stonehenge and all these other places. Tell me that that's not something that is going on between quote-unquote heaven and earth. And we'll talk about the Sphinx and get much more into that. But anyway, I'm going to call it a night because I'm starting to go in and out again. But the good thing is that someone has offered to take care of having the high-speed internet installed, and I'm going to pay them back within the month. So we won't have any more problems like this, and that should be done within the week. So anyway, if you need to contact me with show ideas or something that you're going through or you want to talk about, please contact me at the Texorcist Podcast at gmail.com, and look up the podcast group. Listeners may join the group. Just search the Texorcist Podcast and you will find us. And anyway, love and light to you all. Good night from Texas. See you next time.